Point of order, Grant Robertson, and it will be heard in silence.
Mr Speaker, I seek leave of the House to table paragraphs 39 and 40 of the police report, which says that the police conclude that the elements of section 1342 were met for a prosecution on Mr Banks.
Leave is sought to table that or those pages from that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection. Question number 2, Paul Goldsmith. I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. I missed Materia Ture. I do apologise. Supplementary question, Materia Ture.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and happy suffrage day to you, sir. Does the Prime Minister accept the finding of fact?
Materia Ture, supplementary question.
Does the Prime Minister accept the finding of fact in the police report of 26 July 2012 that, quote, police have established that on the 9th of June 2010, Mr John Banks personally solicited a donation from Mr Kim.com, end quote?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I'm not in a position to judge that, but I know that the local electoral law, the way it's crafted, would mean that that is quite legal to do that. See, if members don't like other members complying with the law, they're free to think that way, but actually the test is whether you meet the law.
Materia Ture.
Point of order, sir.
Point of order.
The question was very clear. The Prime Minister has said previously that he read that particular report and he has not addressed the question, which was very simple. Does he agree with the police finding of fact that John Banks solicited a donation from Kim.com from a report he has read? He has not addressed that question.
Well, the Prime Minister answered the question insofar as he pointed out that to have done that is perfectly legal under the current Act. And I think, you know, he doesn't have to agree with the member, but he pointed out that there's nothing wrong with having done that under the current law. Supplementary question, the Honourable. I beg your pardon. I must come back to Materia Ture first.
Point of order, sir.
Point of order, Materia Ture.
I seek leave to table a copy of the 2012 26 July report from the police, stating that the police have established that John Banks personally solicited a donation from Kim.com.
Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection. Supplementary question, Materia Ture.
Did John Banks tell the Prime Minister or his office earlier this year that he was not aware that Kim.com made a donation to his mayoral campaign?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, as I told the House earlier, Mr Banks assured me through my Chief of Staff that he fully complied with the requirements of the legislation.
Order. Before I go back to Honourable Member, that's not exactly the question asked. The member may repeat a question if there's some doubt as to that. Materia Ture.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Did John Banks tell the Prime Minister or his office earlier this year that he was not aware that Kim.com made a donation to his mayoral campaign?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I wasn't party to the conversation, but to the best of my knowledge, he was unaware of donations that were made. That's why they're anonymous. At the end of the day, you can solicit them and you can have your own supposition, but it doesn't mean that you actually don't.
Materia Ture, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Doesn't the Prime Minister think that if John Banks was being genuinely honest with him, that he would have told him that he solicited a donation from Mr Kim.com, as the police found in their finding of facts?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, no, I don't think you can draw that conclusion. What you can draw as a conclusion from the police was two things. One, that there was insufficient evidence, and secondly, while the return was false, the police themselves said they could not prove that Mr Banks had known that when he signed it, because it was put together by another individual whom Mr Banks relied on.
Materia Ture.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Isn't the Prime Minister's denial just him dancing on the head of a pin when most New Zealanders believe that John Banks was dishonest in his communication to the Prime Minister? And aren't New Zealanders right to expect more from the Prime Minister?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
No, but I think there's a genuine misunderstanding of what's actually permissible under the Local Electoral Act.
The Honourable David Parker.
In light of that answer and the answer about 3 supplementary questions before, is it the Prime Minister's position that it is legal under the existing local electoral donation laws for a member to solicit a donation, for a member to know that a donation was made by someone who they solicited it from, but then to declare that it was anonymous?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, you're asking, the member's asking a legal opinion, and I'm not in a position to offer that, but what I can say, my understanding of the way that was put by that member, that would not be legal. It's quite legal to go and to ask for support. It's quite legal to give indications of how that could be made anonymously. But in the end, the point there, of course, is one never really knows. There were many donations made, as I can see from newspaper reports, for $25,000. It's impossible to know who they came from. Lots of people tell organisations that they will give money. They don't necessarily always do so.
Point of order, Grant Robertson.
Mr. Speaker, I seek leave of the House to table paragraph 38 of the police report that states, further analysis in respect of the evidence collected in the investigation established that the return was wrong and content, and that the donations from SkyCity.com should not have been recorded as anonymous.
The leavers sought to table that page from that document. Is there any objection?
Yes, there is.
There is objection. The Right Honourable Winston Peters supplementary question. Order. Order. I want to hear the order. I must be able to hear the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Yes. Does the Prime Minister accept that the police report says that the elements for a prosecution were established? And if so, then why is he claiming in this House to be able to trust Mr Banks's word?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I haven't seen the report, so it's possible. I do know that the police statement that they put out that summarised the report said a couple of things. One, there is insufficient evidence, but also what I also know from the report this morning was that the police concluded that the return was false. So on that basis, yes, the member may have some validity there, but they could not prove that Mr Banks had known that when he signed it. What the police are quite clearly saying is that on the main charge of whether there could be a position where that the situation was knowingly by Mr Banks false, there's no claim of that by the police.
Supplementary question. The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
If you have 42 donations, all of which were anonymous, all of which were forgotten, would you then trust that man's word in this House if he gave it to you?
Order. The Speaker shouldn't be involved in the question that way. I invite the Right Honourable gentleman to reword his question.
If the Prime Minister is aware that there were 42 donations, all of which were substantial, all of which were anonymous, that means the whole lot were all regarded as being anonymous, why would then the Prime Minister trust the word of Mr Banks on this issue?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, the question at heart is whether the member complied with the law. That's the assurance he's given my office, and I accept that.
Grant Robertson, supplementary
Further to
question.
that answer, does the Prime Minister understand that filing a false return is a breach of the Local Electoral Act, and that is what the police have found that Mr Banks did?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
It could be, Mr Speaker, but as the police themselves said, well, it could be, but as the police said, it's a lesser offence and it was outside the period of time. They also went on to say, that while they concluded that the return was false, they could not prove that Mr Banks had known that. So if you want to go after the person that put it together, that might be right, but not Mr Banks.